My understanding, and now I have to preface this with this is secondhand knowledge, and it is my understanding that the name of the time travel program that the CIA is running is Marvel. I know, laugh if you want, it sounds silly, but at the same time, we're pretty silly and we have a history of making some funny programs. So, that was communicated to me back in 2021 directly from an active intelligence officer, and it has haunted me ever since. It makes everything come into question for me, including the NHI beings themselves and the nature of consciousness and what we could evolve into in the future and the kinds of bodies that we may have, and whether or not what we're really dealing with is interdimensional, like time wizards who have learned how to come and go and talk to us pretty much at their will.
Welcome. I'm here with Anjali. Anjali, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, we've been trying to kind of talk to each other for a while, so I'm glad that the stars have finally aligned and we're able to get on the show. So just to establish where you're coming from for audience members who might not know who you are and things like that, if you could tell the audience just very briefly about your background, what you used to do, how you got into this topic, etc.
Sure. In what I usually call my previous life, I was a defense intelligence agent, or we call ourselves officers, so a defense intelligence officer. And I worked for DIA specific, and that was my first intelligence work. They recruited me out of grad school, and I was immediately placed into a department or a division known as the Human Factors Analysis Center. Its existence isn't classified. I can talk about that. And I began a very rigorous training regiment with DIA, and that led me into my first personality profile. And from there, the profile garnered the attention of some people in really high places, and I was requested to come and brief with them specifically, and it began a whole new level of my career. As an intelligence officer, though I was recruited to do things, though I was tasked with doing such things as being on a director-driven intelligence, I'd say interagency intelligence project that was driven by Admiral Jacoby. And I was selected by the Admiral himself to be a member of this team and to lead like a sub-team. And this led me into a movement into the Pentagon to brief at the Executive Support Office customers, who included the Joint Chiefs of Staff, J2, J3, everything from Secretary Rumsfeld down to, Deputy DASDs, to be, to just throw an acronym out there. I don't want to go through it all, but...
So for folks who don't know some of the acronyms, so J2 is Joint Intelligence, J3 is Joint Operations, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Correct. And so I was assigned to a Secretary of Defense and to the directors of the Defense Reconstruction. I can't remember all of the exact, but it was focused specifically on reconstructing Iraq and Afghanistan. So efforts to rebuild what we had hands in tearing down and to stand up the government there, to help support the local representatives and different party, political, and tribal factions. So it was very intensive. So I did the Middle East, North Africa, Near East, South Asia, the Office of Northern Gulf Affairs, the Defense Reconstruction Security Agreement, I think it was called, and the Defense Security Cooperation Office. So all of these were involved and directed at the Middle East, North Africa, Near East, South Asia, and that's it. So not Far East. However, the Assistant Secretary of Defense that I worked for was in International Security Affairs, and he is the very honorable to me, Peter Rodman, and he was International Security Affairs, which we can deduce that we're looking at strategic intelligence at this point, and strategic affairs. So
in the Middle East or just broader than that?
Russia specifically and global.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at baen.com.
So Russia was the primary focus for that, but under the global, they had me assigned to Middle East, North Africa, Near East, South Asia, and the Office of Northern Gulf Affairs and the others that we had already talked about. None of the programs that I was read into were related to this topic of the phenomena, the UAP or UFO. I will say that while I worked at very high levels and had access to intelligence that we compartmentalized to the point that you could not read it in JWICS, which is the classified intelligence system for top secret and higher, all of its compartmentalizations. But I can tell you firsthand that there are compartmentalizations and special access programs that are not located on the server, that you can only read in person within it's a skiff within a skiff within a skiff. Okay.
Oh, wow.
There's that 3 layers, which means that you already have to be in an area that is secured for only top secret and higher. Okay. And then within that, you go into a special room that you have to be admitted into. And it's actually, I should say, a special office. And in that office are single copies of highly classified intelligence. And you have to be on a very short list to access some of these programs. And
the so-called bigot list is that what it's called?
I think you mean a bullet list.
Well, it's called a bigot list because
Okay.
it's a law. I don't know about that specifically, but there's something in intelligence called a bigot list, and it's not bigot what people think. It's from to Gib, which is to Gibraltar. It came from World War II. Anyway, it's a long.
I think I understand the context of that. And so, yes, I guess that's probably what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so some of those programs that I was read into were part of those special compartmentalizations where only 12 people at a time could have access to this information within a certain period of time that I had no business and no right to determine. It was determined for me. And because of the level that I was working, though I was junior in rank and time, okay, so I was brand new. I, still wet behind the ears. I think they took me in at a year. I was at the Pentagon within my first year, and it was truly like a whirlwind, something that you would only see in the movies. It was swift, and it felt like everything was just perfectly aligning to take me all the way up to the point where my division director, when I was at the ESO, and I'm not telling you this to brag, okay? There's
no, this is really interesting, and this is exactly kind of the stuff that I want to hear from you. Yeah.
Okay, good. My division director at the ESO, shortly after,
what does ESO stand for again?
I'm sorry, the Executive Support Office. That's the one that supports everything that we talked about. All of the defense intelligence and also outside intelligence from any of the agencies and any of the commands that have their joint level intelligence, we would synthesize that to give them our analysis as well. So we were an all source intelligence agency and an all source intelligence executive support office. So we didn't care who was getting it as long as we could analyze it and present those positions from the DIA specific. Okay.
So to really oversimplify it, you weren't collecting intelligence, you were analyzing collected intelligence from all sources. It could be Masson, it could be human, it could be SIGINT, it could be, I'm just speculating, I have no idea. It could be remote viewing. Like
all source intelligence. If you can name it, and some that we kind of joke about, some that you can't name, we would read it, absolutely, and have eyes on it. So we would bring all of that intelligence together.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
To represent the views of DIA specific and what we believed was the most actionable. And so within just a few months of me being in that position, I was verbally told by the division chief that I was working under there that he believed that he was going to be going to the president's intelligence brief, the PIB, we called it. I think the name may have changed slightly since I was there, and I'm not presently in the slang now, I guess, the Pentagon's Urban Dictionary. But he said that when he went, that he would like for me to go with him, and that I would be someone who would brief on his team. So I was involved with tasking for collections. That was something that I did many times, but I was not the collector.
Right.
Unless you consider this collection. And let me explain. The very first time that I saw a shadow being was when I was first entering the agency. I woke up one night and there was what I clearly believed was a man standing at the end of my bed. Okay. Mm-hmm. Completely black, couldn't see anything, but not flat in the sense of like a flat image. Okay.
It's like three-dimensional.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And now, I believe, as controversial as this may sound, I believe that that person either was a remote viewer or an actual part of our time travel program that has been discussed many times, coming out of specifically the CIA. So a CIA-driven program, probably not in the hands of the CIA proper for the intelligence that, what I'm trying to say is that they are probably not holding that intelligence. There's probably a defense contractor who is that middle person that gives them that first degree separation from the program.
Yeah, the CIA always has somebody between them and the problem, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. They're always the first suspect, but they're never the front. So, yeah, what else would you like to know?
Many questions.
Sure.
Many questions.
From there, let me see, what was I worked for BAE. Okay. And again,
British Aerospace, basically?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. And they're global IT. So I did global analysis, and I, again, was working for the Defense Intelligence Agency, but now I was a contractor. So, and they paid me twice as much as I was earning at the Pentagon. So it was a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. And I did that for a few years, and then they recruited me for a remote viewing program. And
BAE did? BAE Systems? Okay.
Recruited me for a remote viewing program, and due to familial and personal obligations that I had in my life, it was not a good time for me to relocate to the location that they wanted me to move to. And dare I say that I regret it? It is a very sorrowful point in my life that I had to turn down that program. So after that, I was a faculty member at Presentation College in Aberdeen, South Dakota. And then I went back into intelligence. So, and at that point, I was stationed out at 29 Palms and working for the Marine Corps, preparing what you would call the executives of the Marine Corps for forward deployment. Mm-hmm. So, and it is in 29 Palms that I first had a mind-blowing, paradigm-shattering experience with a non-human intelligence that lasted for several hours. And then it was only, I think 30 miles away as the crow flies, or the raven, more local.
Yeah, those ravens are everywhere. I was stationed at Fort Irwin, so I'm very familiar with the territory. You didn't say 30 miles from where, though?
From my home in 29 Palms, where my paradigm-shattering experience began.
Can you narrow down on the location, or is that something you can't talk about? If you say the town, I'll probably know.
I was in 29 Palms, and let's see.
Yermo, because that's the Marine Corps logistics base out there, but I don't know if it's 30 miles away.
Okay, so this would have been 30 miles southwest in Yucca Valley.
Okay.
It's still considered the high desert, but that was the location of my in-person experience with NHI in 2018. So my paradigm shattering began in 2017, and within a couple of months, I was meeting these individual NHI in person, like having a full sensory experience that was more real than anything that I've experienced ever in my life.
Okay. All right. I have so many questions. Okay. So just for establishing background, what years were you, and you've gotten out of intelligence since then?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So what was your span of time? Like, when did you first go in the DIA, and then
We're looking at
including
somewhere
overlap with BAE. What was that range of
2003,
time?
2004 timeframe I went in. Then I taught for a few years and then went back and exited in 2016.
Okay. And then what did you get your PhD in?
I don't have a PhD.
Or sorry,
What did I do?
undergrad, master's?
Yes. My undergrad work was in political science and sociology. And what would you call it? I guess minored in American Indian Studies. I had an associate's degree in American Indian Studies. Then I went to graduate school, and it was while I was in graduate school studying sociology that I was recruited to DIA and attended classes at the Foreign Service Institute and the National Intelligence College, I think is what it's called today.
And what
the National
universities?
Intelligence University. They've changed the name of it since I was there, and so please excuse any error. It's my own.
And then where did you go to undergrad, and where were you doing grad school?
In South Dakota, there is a university called Black Hills University in Spearfish. It's in the Black Hills. It's absolutely beautiful there. It's a smaller institution, and you have wonderful smaller classes in almost every subject and every class that you take. So outside of Psych 101, which was by far the largest, there are a couple of hundred students in there all the time. The largest class I was in, I think we may have had 30, 34 people. So the students there receive really good instruction, and the opportunity to ask questions and to have a dialogue with the professor and with other classmates the opportunities are every day, every class period. Everyone gets to share their point of view and to ask questions and to gain the knowledge that they're looking for. So you suddenly have a very diverse room of students who are presenting, very diverse perspectives. And I think the learning environment is just so ripe for growth, And yeah, it's the best decision I ever made. In fact, at one point, I had transferred out and had gone to the University of Rochester in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I was there.
Cold there. Very cold. It's very cold there.
Yeah, it is. In fact, I lived right off the Erie Canal. It was only, I think there was the canal, then there was a small home, then my driveway and my home. So we were really close, and it was wonderful. I could always hear the creek and the good times. So I went as a Robert McNamara Scholar and was doing interdisciplinary research at that time. And unfortunately, I received a head injury. And so as a result of that, I was having difficulty with my short-term memory. And so I didn't have any history with this college or with this university. And I was getting lost in the halls all the time and in the tunnels underneath the buildings.
Oh, God.
I was getting lost and I would forget where I was going, and somebody would find me. And this is a true story. It was terrible. And somehow I was able to perform my way through that semester, but I immediately transferred back to Black Hills State University, where I was familiar, where I had a lot of social ties. I had a really deep bond with a lot of people who were local and had local families, and I knew their families really well. And so it was just a really great place for me to go back to. And I credit it with it being the foundation for my recruitment by DIA. Was some of the papers and research that I had done while I was at that university, I believe, gained their attention. And here we are today.
So. All right. Sorry, I'm going way back, but I just want to.
Sure.
There's a lot of things I was curious about. So, human factors analysis.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you probably can't talk about the individual that got you prominence. I'm just going to assume that's the case.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay. But
I will tell you this, and again, this may be attached to the phenomena in some way. Typically, when any new officer comes in, their first profile is like their teaching profile. The analyst themselves are allowed to choose their target. Typically, the target has to have, let's just say, a lot of intelligence has been gathered on them so that you can.
That's somebody else who's done a similar profile, you can kind of measure it against.
Well, I think it's less that and more that you want to have a thriving body from which to draw your analysis. So you need a good amount of, I guess, what you would call evidence to support your conclusions. Pretty simple stuff. You know what I mean? So you want a lot of it so that you can apply the rubric that we're working with essentially against all of that information to rule out and affirm and come up with a personality profile that's actionable.
Now, as part of your training, you mentioned that you were recruited to do remote viewing. At what point were you trained to do remote viewing? And was it related to the human factors analysis, or was it kind of an assignment outside of that? You can't talk about it, just push back.
No, I can tell you that I did not go on that contract. And
so you were never trained. They just wanted you. It was like an opportunity, so they would train you.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And I think that this is why, going back to what I was saying about this individual and how I ended up choosing this first individual as, well, like my teaching profile. And really, when you're never done learning in that field. So it was meant to be a full-blown profile that could be submitted at the highest levels if it were to make it there. Okay. So when I say teaching, I don't want to undermine the effect that the profile can still have.
Yeah, it's still usable. It
has to be
intelligence product that will be used. It's not just let's just see what she does. It's actually it's the first thing that's used, but you're probably maybe getting coaching or something like that in the process. That's probably the only difference.
Absolutely. Working under a senior intelligence officer who is reading all of the same intelligence that you are and is guiding you and challenging you. So you can have full-blown debates with this person, and if you can convince them that they're wrong, then it goes in. But if you can't, then you have to essentially then from there it goes. Sorry, my little one.
No worries. Plus, I have a random question that you probably just say I never heard of it or whatever, but I'm very curious. So you said you worked at BAE Systems for how long?
I worked for them for 3 years.
Okay, and this is kind of the mid to late aughts. It's probably kind of beginning.
It was at mid 2000s. Yeah.
Okay. In terms of, again, random question. So, have you ever heard of the Marconi murders?
I have. Can you refresh me, though?
I believe, I'd have to double check, but I believe that BAE Systems back in like the late 80s, early 90s, so before your time there, but not that far off, you may have known people who knew something about it. BAE Systems had acquired this Italian company called Marconi.
Yes.
And there were a spate of really odd suicides at this company. And officially, or at least not officially, but in the mainstream media at the time, which after the last 5 or so years, I don't even believe the stuff back then because it was easier to lock down than it is today.
Mm-hmm.
But the official story or the official conspiracy, let's say, or narrative seemed to be that Marconi was a wholly owned subsidiary of BAE Systems, and they had a contract related to the Star Wars program. If you go kind of deeper conspiracy than that, you could argue that this Grush craft that they found back in the 1930s in Magenta, Italy, was somehow under the custody. Again, I'm like drawing a lot of broad conclusions. Was owned by Marconi. That custody of that said object was transferred to BAE Systems, and there was a risk of that leaking or something. And then there's another narrative, again, closer to official narrative, that the KGB was killing people associated with Star Wars. So
I have no doubt.
I have. It could be all of the above. It could be none of the above. It could, they could be actual suicides. But if you read about some of these suicides, you're like, there's no way that person would be capable of killing themselves in that manner.
In such a way.
Nor would they choose them. Yeah. But anyway, That's a long, meandering question. Was there any scuttlebutt about that while you were there? Or is that just kind of never talked about?
Nope, never talked about.
Okay. All right. We'll move on. All right. Now, this shadow being, let's go back to that, since that's, because I'm sure there's people who probably dropped off by this point because they're like, why didn't he pursue that line of questioning? I am, but I wanted to make sure I asked questions that I had so that it was at least a logical flow.
Sure.
So you woke up, was it kind of a sleep paralysis sort of scenario where you couldn't move, or?
No.
And were you in a hypnagogic state, or were you fully awake?
I was fully awake. I would call it jolted somehow awake. And I sat up straight in my bed. Now, I may be confusing like the first from the second, third, because this was an ongoing issue that I had.
Yeah.
And I did casually report it. And that's what I'm going to say about that. It was a casual report. I did not write any kind of statement. It was just, hey, I don't know what's going on. This has started happening. If this is the result of foreign capability that I don't know about, I just want to report that I might be targeted by foreign operatives. That was how.
And who did you report this to? Your immediate supervisor, or?
Yes. Yep.
And how did they respond?
Thank you. Thank you for telling me.
No reaction, though? No, we've seen this before, or don't worry about it. This is something that's common.
Well, they would never say something like that unless you were read in on that information. And I'm not certain that she would have been at the time. It may have been something that others had also experienced, and so this isn't the first time, and so there may have been that type of information going on or that type of knowledge on her end. But as far as like what it is, I don't think that would have been something that she would have had access to. So
okay, did she? Again, this is almost 20 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So, and people still aren't open about this kind of stuff, particularly, in a place where people have TSSCI clearances and things like that. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't any like psych eval or anything like that they tried to put. She just said, thank you for telling me. And then, all right, that's a tell. That's definitely a tell, right? And that's all I'm going to say there. But in this experience, how long did it last when you were jolted awake?
I would say, gosh, like realistically, it was probably only a second to a second and a half, long enough for me to be able to tell that it wasn't just an image that there was a three-dimensionality to it. And I would even suggest a fourth dimensionality, that perhaps it was someone from another time or another place, or those two things cannot be separated, and it was from another time and place. I'm not sure.
So it's about a second or two. Did it just vanish, or?
It didn't fade. It was like out, like a light.
Okay. Did you notice any features on the face? Like, did you see eyes? Did you?
It was complete silhouette.
Like,
Each time it was a complete silhouette. Sometimes the gentleman would wear a hat. Sometimes he would not. But I always felt that it was the same gentleman. But I don't know. I don't know.
How did you feel when you saw this thing?
It scared the hell out of me. You know, I was living alone with my two children at the time in a new place. And, you know, my first reaction was that I was looking at the silhouette of a man standing in my room. And so I would have, you know, a full body response to fight or flight. And I was ready to fight. So I was be very elevated. And then poof, you know, in the next split second, it's gone. I've had hypnagogic dreams and awakenings. And I understand the difference between the two. And this, I felt, was either something technological or something phenomenal, or perhaps the same thing. Yeah. You know, perhaps those two things aren't separated. So I did not think that it was a sign of my mental health. Everything else was going just fine. There were no other types of what somebody could construe as hallucinations. And because of the subject that I was working on at the time and the profile that I was doing at that time, I was very concerned that I was actually being targeted by foreign intelligence.
Okay. All right. So did you get a sense of this entity's intent, or were you just too terrified to really think too deeply about that?
It was like he was just looking at me. I really can't explain it. There weren't feelings, lingering feelings of malintent. There were feelings of being violated, in the sense that my privacy is being violated, that who knows how long that was going on before I woke up. Why was I jolted awake? Did they wake me up? You know, was it my instincts? You know, I had a lot of questions. And so some of them, most of them, I had to keep to myself. So once it was reported, I just figured that if it wasn't concerning to her, then I should.
Yeah, there's no follow-up, right? There's no follow-up whatsoever, which again is a tell. It means that this is something that, I would, using some deductive logic and intuition, I would say that this is probably not something that, particularly for intelligence operatives, well, not operatives, but yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of intuition, it was intuitively that I chose my first profile subject. As soon as I saw the name, I knew that that was the one. And it was someone that we didn't have very much information on. So I had to really make that argument and convince my immediate, the SIO of the, SIO of the division, that I could satisfactorily do what was necessary for the profile. And it took a couple of days, and I was just more adamant about it. And she finally just threw her hands up and was just like, fine, do, go ahead.
Knock yourself out.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is your one opportunity to shine. You want to make sure you pick something easy, but if you want to pick something hard, okay.
Exactly. Yeah, go ahead. And so that was the profile that landed me at CENTCOM, briefing the deputy commander of Central Command. It's what led me to the director division or director-driven project, and it's what landed me at the Pentagon. It was the catalyst for my upward movement that would have landed me in the White House had I not moved to the contract position. So I've had a lot of questions in my head about that. At the time, I didn't. At the time, I just thought, wow, aren't I so smart? Look what I did. But my experiences since then and my touch with what I'm going to call non-human intelligences those experiences and that contact has really changed how I view that. I view that as I was already entangled with someone that was the guiding hand to where I needed to go. And I'll say that today, at this period of time in the world, and especially for America, I feel very strongly that that particular person and the insight that we were able to gain has truly affected the political environment that we're working in right now with strategic intelligence and security. So, and I don't say that, lightly, but
I don't know why this is, but
tensions are very high, and it's interesting how relevant that profile is. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm probably wrong, but I'm just going to say a name. I don't want you to react, but the probability of me being correct is so infinitesimally small that I doubt I would even happen upon it. But the name that keeps coming up in my head, and I'm thinking about some anecdotal stories that I know about this, that I've heard about this, and I won't say it on this call, but I can tell you in private. But the name Muqtada al-Sadr keeps coming up, but that's...
Nope.
Yeah, well, you don't have to confirm or deny it.
No, I'm denying.
Yeah.
I'm confirming that is not the person, and that's fine. And I need to restate, it's not that particular profile, it's the project that I worked on with the director. And so I misstated that earlier. So that profile is what got me to that project. And I feel like what we were doing then and some of the tech that I saw then and what we were assessing then is incredibly relevant to the state of security for, I'm going to say, the entire world right now, the safety and security of the entire world. And that's the kind of program that changes a career and changes your life. And it certainly did. And it's what has led me here, right now. But looking back now, I feel like the phenomena that the members of the council were with me then, and that I didn't recognize it. I didn't.
When you say the council, what council do you mean?
Oh,
again, I don't want to go too much because I want to do more. I want to do this more in depth, but just as an aside, what council?
Sure. Just clarifying, the council is a 9-member body.
The Council of 9. This is like Andrej Puharich sort of. You haven't heard of that before?
Mm-mm.
After this, because I'm not super. There were a lot of prominent families. I think one maybe related to the Astors, the Bell family. I think back in Maine, they were doing seances in Maine. And Peter Levenda has, I think there's a book he has called Sinister Forces, where it's all about the Council of 9. That's why I was wondering, when you said the council, I immediately went to the Council of 9.
Sinister Forces, huh? Interesting.
Yeah, it's not just about it's about other things about. Okay. The tagline is America is a haunted house.
Ooh,
basically.
I like it.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to. Okay, there's so much
that's
to talk
great.
about now. But look up Andrej Puharich, also an intelligence figure, worked closely with CIA. Yeah, there's a lot of deep history behind some of this stuff.
Wow.
In fact, there was a recent interview with, and that's the other thing too. Like, if you kind of try to be as objective as possible about all this stuff, there are it's not just, in my opinion, I could be completely wrong. It's not just nuts and bolts. There's a metaphysical component. There's also, it's slightly nuanced, but it's probably the same thing. There's an occult component. So, I'll give you an example. There was a recent interview on the Julian Dory show of Jason Sands and what's his name?
James Fox. Yeah.
And just randomly out of the blue, Jason Sands mentions, because he used to red team and listen to conversations to assess security principles. Okay. He just randomly mentions the Ashtar Command, right? Which, that's not new. That's something that George Van Tassel back in the 1950s claimed to have channeled or something like that. Okay. Alan Greenfield, I don't know if you know who Alan Greenfield is.
Hold on. Can we stop for a sec? You're George Van Tassel. That's the gentleman who lived under the ground at Giant Rock, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
Yes, this is, I'm very relaxed, and this is very much the genuine me. So you will see my excitement. This is not a media.
Did I just make a random connection that you didn't realize?
Well, I think that you'll love this. After my contact experiences began in 2017 and then culminated in 2018 with my experience that we'll get into in the next episode, I believe, I changed my entire life. Everything about me changed from, and I'm not kidding, my hair. I had straight hair, but after I went into that underground facility, my hair has been just progressively becoming curlier and curlier. And it started then. It started like after that. You can see it photographically. My hair just completely changes, and it happens quite fast. By my birthday, which was only 9 days later, that same year, I have photographs of me with, you can see that it's already like incredibly wavy. And I know that doesn't seem like anything very interesting or symbolic of anything, but to me, I felt like it was a sign that I had undergone some kind of fundamental change that had even perhaps affected my hair follicles, that maybe I had some type of DNA change. Or
yeah, I was going to say there has to be something rooted in a change in DNA.
Right. Like something was changed or, unlocked. I've wondered that. So it's something that, I don't know. I underwent such a change in every way that, faced with various options, my daughter and I, we got an RV and we spent a year and a half traveling through California. Okay. Mm-hmm. And in preparation for that, I felt a need to give away a lot of my material belongings. Like, I wanted to minimalize as much as possible. And not just because we were going to be in an RV, because we had a storage unit. It was because I felt less connected materially to the world, to the point where I felt like my material belongings were more like leaded boots that I was wearing.
Like anchors, right?
Yeah, that just weighing me down so terribly. I felt like the weight of how much stuff I had and how it was negatively affecting me spiritually and even physically, and how I needed to not only recognize that I could live with less and that I would be happier that way, but that other people were in need of the extra things that I had that I didn't. And so we went through that process of shedding some of that, moved into the RV, and our very first long stay was in Giant Rock. And we had no idea at that time about the history of Giant Rock and George Van Tassel and what is it, the Sound Dome?
Yeah, it's like
Is that
as
what
soon
it's
as you
called?
enter, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like this. It looks like a geodesic sort of.
Yes,
dome.
exactly. It
Yeah.
starts with an I. It, okay,
Yeah, I can't remember.
whatever.
Yeah, I would.
Doesn't matter. But what is interesting is that this was after my contact, of course, as I had specified. And while I was staying there, the NHI beings, they came to our spot and took me from, or I should say, I woke up, they were there, and
This is in 2018.
no, this is actually 2019 now.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But anyway, I went with them and we went back to the underground base. Okay. So that was about, I can send you a picture, maybe, a couple of 100 yards from Van Tassel's underground place. We were just around the corner. So,
all right, we're definitely going to get on all this, but I want to. Where were we before you mentioned the council?
golly, I don't know.
Okay, so I think there was one more question I had about. I think we were talking about this shadow being.
Okay.
You had mentioned something about the CIA time travel program, something or other.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
My understanding, and now I have to preface this with this is secondhand knowledge, and it is my understanding that the name of the time travel program that the CIA is running is Marvel. I know, laugh if you want, it sounds silly, but at the same time, we're pretty silly and we have a history of making some funny programs. So, yeah, that was communicated to me back in 2021 directly from an active intelligence officer, and it has haunted me ever since. It makes everything come into question for me, including the NHI beings themselves and the nature of consciousness and what we could evolve into in the future and the kinds of bodies that we may have, and whether or not what we're really dealing with is interdimensional, like time wizards who have learned how to come and go and talk to us pretty much at their will.
Yeah, that would be. And then is this like a program that they developed in the past, or something that they developed in the future? And or what other information do you know about the program?
I don't know very much about it, other than that it is, or it was at the time, an active program and was most likely attached to some of the legacy programs that we've had. So I think we've really been careful about the direction that we take with respect to the phenomena. And I believe that their ability to move through time and space has become one of our number one priorities for being able to effectively do ourselves and survive it and understand it.
Okay. All right. Now, that was kind of your first foray into, I think, according to your story, that of the kind of, we could say paranormal, but I don't mean like in a ghostly way, but just something that's otherworldly or supernormal, however you want to frame it. When was the first experience that you had with these NHI that you were talking about, this Council of Nine?
The first time that I understood that there was such a council was in 2017. As far as the history of contact with these particular beings or with other beings of the same sort, I would say it has been a lifetime of contact. And
So this is something you remembered retrospectively, like you didn't have
yes,
memories until, okay.
absolutely. I had memories. I didn't understand them. I had memories and recollections with other family members and friends of a craft that was over our house in 1976. It would have been. I was 4.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always knew that there was something more that we didn't know in society and academically, but I always knew that there was more. And I think that that experience may have framed my worldview pretty tightly when I was very young. I think that it had a profound impact or effect on me, and perhaps an impact.
Another weird question. Do you have any Celtic or Cherokee in your bloodline?
I have both Celtic and Cherokee in my bloodline. Okay. In fact, one of my maternal grandmothers was on the Dawes Indian Registry. I'm not using the right terms, but maybe it was called the Indian Registry, but it was a registry of all of the Cherokee that they moved along what we call now the Trail of Tears.
Trail of Tears.
And one of my maternal grandmothers is listed there, and she was a full-blood Cherokee. And since that time, we've had others who have other Cherokee that are in our bloodline. And so I couldn't give you a blood quantum. I would have to do a lot of math and a lot of conferring with the Cherokee tribe themselves before I would ever even dream of doing such a thing. And then, yes, we have Irish, Celtic Irish in our ancestry as well.
Okay, I think now is probably as good a time of any to end the episode, but we will continue this fascinating. I'm sorry for the audience for going so slowly, but the first half of your background was so fascinating that I had to probe a little bit to understand more about it. So
it's okay. And I know there were a few times that we began talking about something and then I jumped, and, I really apologize. We can definitely come back to that.
Oh, you didn't jump. I didn't let you go there. I wanted to keep things focused on kind of your background first, and then we're definitely going to dive into all the NHI stuff in the next episode. So I appreciate you, Anjali, and I'm fascinated. So we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been trying to get you on for a while, so I appreciate you spending your time with me today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's two options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site. And there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much and keep watching. I really appreciate it.